Welcome back to another reading and correcting of Stepping Up with me, Kindar, the Tiger Writes, and I, the Tiger Supervisor. Today we are doing chapter 29. You can't seriously be doing this, Jekyll told Diane as he and Tibs reached her table. She was alone again, and this time it wasn't because her team had abandoned her. It was because she'd abandoned them. You're the team leader. You can't just walk away from them and join another one. There were 4 tankards before her, and as she reached for one, Jekyll took it. She glared at him. What has being a leader gotten me? She demanded. Jeff's dead. To his surprise, instead of drinking the tankard's content, Jekyll sniffed it and made a face. You shouldn't be drinking this stuff, PN, especially if you have a run today. What do you care? She asked, taking the tankard from him and downing it. You're always drinking, even when you have runs. Ale, not this stuff. That's going to kill you. Good, she snarled. That's what I deserve for getting Jeff killed. You didn't? Jekyll ground his teeth and looked at Tibs, his expression inviting him to jump in and help. But Tibs didn't know what to say. Or rather, he couldn't think of anything that disagreed with her. It come down from his excitement at being rid of the pain of corruption in his essence to the memory of Fedora's death, and it still hurt. Enough that he thought about not getting out of bed this morning. Wouldn't have. Jekyll hadn't dragged him out. Numbing the pain with whatever she was drinking had a certain appeal, as did ending it completely, so he would never have to feel like this again. If not for his friends and how his death would make them feel, Tibs might have done it already. At least get a different team, Pian. Jekyll said. Why? Dahomel is a good leader. He's an Omega. The fighter replied, exasperated. The entire team is. They're just doing the first floor. You're not going to get anything out of that. There's got to be an Epsilon team in need of a fighter. There's been a lot of them not making out of the dungeon, too. At least I have a chance at keeping them alive on the first floor. She raised the tankard and motioned to her table. You're hurt, Jekyll said, looking at Tibs again. Don't make this decision now. Help them for this run, then rest, breathe. Don't you fucking tell me what to do. She was up and in Jekyll's face. Your man's still here. She pointed to the approaching Trosef. He's safe. You see how you feel when he's dead and it's your fault. Jeffrey's death wasn't your fault, Trosef said, putting the tankard on the table. And this is your last one. You have a run today. Don't tell me what to do either, she ordered. I have the coin. That would be plural. I have the coins. You're going to keep bringing them to me. She threw a silver at him, and the server caught it with the ease of a man who had many of them thrown at him by angry or too drunk to aim customers. I want you to come back and spend more of your well-earned coins. Joseph placed it on the table. Placed the coin on the table. So, yes, I can tell you that this is the last Ithracon I will be serving you. I'll take my coin elsewhere, she told him. What's the owner going to say then? My dad's going to say he doesn't want your death to be because of something I let you do. There are plenty of taverns that won't care about more than the coins you give them right now. We aren't one of them. We aren't one of those. Fine, she sat and drank angrily. She sat and drank angrily. Tibs could see that she'd go to one of the taverns. She'd lost her special man. Her pain was stronger than what Fedora caused him. He'd only known her for a short while, and as nothing more than a friend, he tried to help survive the dungeon. It failed. Tibs, Jekyll called, halfway to their table. He shook his head. He didn't want food right now. He didn't want to be around Jekyll in his good mood. He also didn't want to think about Fedora. Diane, he said when she slammed a nearly empty tankard on the table. Why don't we go to the training field and you start teaching me how to hold a sword? My sickness gone. Of course, a smile. What's the point? She replied, her mood turning morose. It's not like it's going to keep you alive any more than Jeff. That thing's set on eating us all. It's got to be better than sitting here, right? She eyed him suspiciously. I'll tell Joseph to let you drink more when we come back. And I will agree, the server said, startling Tibs. He'd expected him to go with Jekyll or back to serving customers. Frau, the innkeeper called. Dealing with a customer, Dad. This can't wait. Go to Gulmer and see if See if he'll sell us salt. We're almost out. There's a frown. How's that? He headed for the bar. There's 4 bags left in the cellar. Rats got into there and ripped them open, and somehow this morning's rain found a crack and got into that too. Russ was only able to salvage enough for the day. The rest of the conversation was lost among the rest, as they were among the rest. A lot among the other voices. As they were close enough, they no longer needed to raise their voice. Yeah. Among the others, the rest of the conversation was lost among the others as they were close enough, they no longer needed to raise their voices. Just refocused on Payan. Yeah, just focused on Payan, who still looked like she preferred to keep drinking. Please, I'd rather do something than think about. Close his mouth. She sighed, standing. Come on, let's go waste your time. For the next 5 days, Tibs found her every morning before she drank too much and convinced her to go to the field for training. She made him pay for each time by forcing him to use a sword nearly his height, and that felt heavier than it had to be. When he pointed out the short sword was what he wanted, she'd smirk evilly and told him to deal with it. She was training him, he was going to learn the way she wanted. If he wasn't happy with it, he could let her drink in peace. They had not swallowed any more complaints and used as much of the little earth essence he had as he could to make himself strong enough to hold the massive weapon up. He got to train with pulling in that essence as he used it. But it didn't help. There was only so much of it he could put on his arm before it became visible and gave his secret away. He was so exhausted after a few hours of this that he had no strength to think about anything for the rest of the day. On the 6th day, Tian's stable was occupied by her old team and the new one, but not her. Solemn expression and tankards made Tip stop before he reached them. Then he forced himself to approach them. How? He asked, swallowing the pain. They didn't have to tell him she was dead. You weren't due for a run for 3 more days. He couldn't stop the accusatory tone. She talked one of the guards into letting her fill in for the Omega team that was missing a fighter. He said, instead of her. The first floor killer? It's hard, Theomil said, and Tibs glared at him. Of course it was hard for him. He was still an Omega archer. She was a row, Tibs said, looking at the others for an actual explanation. Carr gave it to him. She gave up. Tibs swallowed. He tried so hard to avoid his pain by keeping her from having to feel hers. How could he have failed like that? He backed away, trying to decide if he felt disgusted at them for sitting there when they'd done nothing to help, or him, who'd used her for nothing. He turned and shoved Jackal out of his way as he ran out of the inn, ignoring his friend's amused ribbing. Nearly blinded from the tears, he climbed to the inn's roof, then tried to outrun his pain. The house wasn't what Tibs expected. Not the first time he'd looked at it, and not this time. He hadn't outrun his pain, but he'd outrun the tears. He cursed corruption for not being there. Something to make him trip and fall and break his neck. His neck would have been nice. So much for corruption and its promise of helping him, he thought bitterly. His roof running had taken him near the noble's neighborhood because there was just no way to avoid ending up there if he ran for any amount of time. And as he considered turning around, he'd realized that after failing 2 friends, he could make sure Jackal didn't have to deal with his father. The small house Sebastian had told Jackal he bought so he could stay close to his son was anything but. At least, he hadn't lied when he said it was on the outskirts of the nobles for the moment. It was the only occupied house, and by the lavish construction, it was expected only nobles could afford them. It was the only occupied house. Where's my cursor? Occupied house there. And by the lavish construction, it was expected only the nobles could afford the others. The house was away from the road, with a yard filling the space and a path leading to the front entrance. There was a yard at the back, as well as on each side, with houses marking the limits, with their yard also in front, pushing the road away. It was a noble thing, wasting the space that could be better used for another building. Sebastian had the largest house of them, as well as the only one with yards all around, and was 2-story tall. It made reaching it from the street without being noticed difficult. But Tibs hadn't come by the street, and it was the same height as the buildings around. He'd had to use essence to reach the roof, extending it with water, but if he wanted, and was interested in taking his time, he could have found a path with a roof close enough he'd be able to make the leap unassisted. He'd walked around it the first time he'd come, the day after. The day after Sebastian spoke with Jacko. It had been to familiarize himself with it, in case Sebastian caused problem for his friend. Tibs was done waiting for that. He was going to make sure the man knew he wasn't safe in Craggle Rock. It was Tibbs's town, and he didn't want him there. He didn't want him here. He lowered himself from the roof with one hand. Whoever had built it had only considered the distance to the ground as a deterrent against rogue. So the window was close enough to the roof. Tibbs could reach the bottom without letting go of it. Oh boy. Alright, that's a lot of roofs in the paragraph. Tibbs lowered himself with one hand. You know what? Whoever had built it had only considered the distance to the ground as a deterrence against rogue. So the window was close enough to the roof. Tibbs could reach the bottom without letting go of it. He paused as he was about to push on the window to test if it was locked. The essence woven through it tingled. There had been no essence there when he'd come the previous time. The window only had a latch to keep someone like him from pushing it inward and getting in. He hadn't been impressed by it then. He opened his senses and nearly lost his grip on the roof. The essence wasn't simply woven through the window. It was a tight, complex weave. He studied the other windows on the house within his range, and they all had the same kind of weave. He climbed back and sat on the roof. Climbed back up and sat on the roof. Tibbs knew little of enchanted items. Sorcerers and dungeons were the ones who made them, not rogues. But Tibbs had sensed many of them since acquiring the ability to sense essence. What he had determined was that the tighter the weave, the stronger the effect was. The complexity he wasn't certain yet, but complexity meant multiple essence used, so he thought it meant the result, once triggered, would include all those essence. Tirania's distance stalking gem was tightly woven, but it didn't feel too complex. The armor and weapons still gave as loot were neither complex nor tightly woven. The magic protecting the guild's building was both tight and complex, more so than this house, but only because it permeated the entirety of it, not just the access point. He looked down at the window. Could essence be woven into a lock? If it could, what kind of key would be needed? He'd have to come up with a way to ask Alistair. He was a rogue, so it would be simple. Only, that was for later. Right now, he wanted into this house, and that window kept that from happening. He cursed, stood, and looked around. He smiled. The smoke drifting out of the chimney was thick, so they had a good fire going, and they probably thought that was enough to keep anyone from entering that way. Climbed on top and looked into the opening. All right, the smoke and the size of the chimney would keep most rogues out, but neither was a problem for Tibs, being as small as he was, and having essence to help him. The light was far enough it would be on the ground floor. From there he could sneak about until he found Sebastian and gave him his orders. The tightness made holding on easier as he lowered himself, using air to move the smoke around him so he wouldn't choke on it. As he got close enough to make out voices, he felt the heat of the large fire. Lowering himself further, he became uncomfortable, and he considered moving up and looking for loose bricks to enter a room on the second floor. "This isn't much," Sebastian said, and Tibs froze. "Yes, sir," a woman answered. "We have to be careful not to alert the others." Tibs knew that voice. "I understand," Sebastian said dismissively. How is that coming along? Did the reminder you leave? Have the intended effect? I don't know, sir. No one has seen your daughter since. Sebastian Lord snorted. She'll show up and come groveling for a bone. I'm more interested in the others. Did it remind them where their allegiance are? I think so, sir, the woman said. She was the one from the fire. He was certain of it. The one who had been screaming at him, Jenna, and Dawn for acting. The problem is that if I'm too direct in asking, all it'll take is a stray word from them, and all it'll take is a stray word from them for, wow, hard knuckle to pick up a lie. Without more ways to shield them, I can't. Fine, Sebastian said with an annoyed sigh. I have the craftsmen working on making more already, but they're frustratingly slow to make. And before you say it, I can't rush him. I learned that the hard way with the previous sorcerer I employed. She went up in flame in the middle of enchanting one of those. Papers was moved. How about that annoyance? I have someone on it. Again, it has to be done carefully, but trust me, they will learn that you are the better of the available options. Good. More paper. And my son? She sighed. Sir, my son? Sebastian repeated, tone turning angry. I haven't been able to get anyone who you wouldn't recognize close to him. The person I paid to deliver the message was found the next morning beaten to a pulp. I don't think your son appreciates being told he needs to return home so he can take up his studies. I sent 3 more with the skill to take him on, and only 1 returned, barely able to walk and speak. And what did they have to say for themselves? Your son gave them a message to pass along. He's a runner, not a Wells. He belongs to the guild and the dungeon, not you. Anyone else sent with messages from you will not be returning. Hesitant pause. Sir, if I may, go on. Jekyll is a lost cause. You should focus on getting one of your other children ready. Even Serbo would be a no. Jackie will take over for me. It's his duty. It's how it will happen. Just needs to be made to see that. If you say so, sir. I know so. Sebastian snapped. You're dismissed. Steps moving away, a door opening and closing. Silence. Movement again. Soft shoes against instead of boots. Bristol clinking. Clinking. Liquid pouring. A sigh. Why, Jackie? Why are you fighting your destiny so damn hard? Sebastian's sigh sounded pain. You know what was read. You're the only one who can ensure our family's survival. Sebastian said. First thing best. Maybe I should have told you she was the one who read it. Maybe you wouldn't have fled if you'd known that. A knock. Sir, a man said on the other side of the door. Your guests have arrived? Sebastian stood. The door opened, then closed. Tibs lowered himself, and the heat of the fire became painful. Cursing silently, he moved up. He wanted to take the papers. Trino would have read them and would have known what Sebastian was planning. Still, he could tell Jekyll about what he'd heard, and they could look for whom Sebastian was targeting. Commodore would help, as would Karina. Mez would work to protect the town. Once he saw Sebastian wasn't any kind of noble, but just another criminal, even the archer would help. This would be the perfect way to hurt Sebastian and get him to leave his town. This concludes chapter 29 of Stepping Up. If you are enjoying this, leave a like. If you want to know when the next one is going to be, subscribe, hit the bell. If you want to read a little ahead or the first book, it's available for free on Royal Road. If you want to support me or read further ahead on this story or any of the other stories I have posted there, you can do so on my Patreon. And if you want to do this, to watch me, well, listen to me do this live, or watch too, fumble my way. You can do so on my Twitch. You can also come watch me write every day of the week. The links are in the notes. And with that, I shall wish you a good day.